Listen, I did film and television studies at university for 3 years. I spent hours reading countless books and articles on subjects spanning from film all the way to television. Not a single one mentioned Hugh Grant once.
I achieved the hardest qualification across any university or college ever, a 2-1 in history. Let me tell you, the only thing that I learned was that we, as a society, have a history of denying and neglecting Hugh Grant's artistic and cultural relevance, not just in this country, but in the entire world.
I met Oscar at a Hugh Grant-themed event I put on at the Students' Union.
It felt as though Diggory and I were the only ones there, and we agreed that there was a Hugh Grant-shaped hole in academia.
We decided to put it right ourselves. We want to show people that he's an icon in acting.
We want to show people he's more than just a bumbling posh guy.
I'm Diggory Waite.
And I'm Oscar Beardmore Gray. And this is...
Taking Hugh for Granted.
Hello and welcome to Taking Hugh for Granted, the podcast in which two Hugh Grant enthusiasts watch every single film starring Hugh Grant in the attempt to answer the simple question: is this film taking Hugh for granted? Is this film good on its own, or does it rely on the bumbling Brit for its acclaim? I'm Diggory Waite, and I'm joined, as always, by my colleague and fellow Hugh Grant obsessive, Oscar Beardmore Gray. Oscar, how the hell are you doing, mate?
Doing great, Diggs. I have to say, I'm sort of caught in two minds here, because on the one hand, I am absolutely thrilled after watching the end of The Undoing, but it's bittersweet because we're unlikely to see Hugh on our screens again for a little while, so that's a little bit sad. But the overriding feeling and emotion is one of pure joy, because we just saw the most epic moment in Hugh Grant filmography possibly ever.
I mean, what we've just come off the back of the finale of The Undoing. I mean, boy oh boy, do you get your fill of Hugh Grant. Like, we have been absolutely spoiled the last few weeks. We've been having to upload episodes left, right and Chelsea because there's been so much Hugh Grant, and they packed all the Hugh Grant goodness into that final episode. So we'll talk about that today, because we're going to do things slightly differently. Usually on Taking Hugh for Granted, we'll watch a film, sometimes a TV show. We will talk about the film or the TV show all in one go, talk about whole little different bits of it. The thing is with The Undoing is we've been keeping you guys up to date. So we've got 3 episodes talking about episodes 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 already. So today we're going to do things slightly differently. If you want to hear all of our thoughts on every single episode, you can go back and find those. Indulge yourself. Have a wonderful time. But today it will be a spoilerific review. As we usually do, we'll ask ourselves, have we been taking Hugh for granted? But we'll mostly focus on the finale and the show as a whole. Usually, as you guys know, we have the main man, Synopsis Simon, doing the synopses for us. But obviously, at the moment, there's all sorts of things going on with coronavirus, and we've had to lock down in different places. But don't worry, we can't have an episode without him, so we've got him down the line to do our synopsis. Take it away, Synopsis Simon.
The Undoing, directed by Suzanne Bier, written by David E. Kelly, and shown across 6 episodes in 2020. Shortly after a young woman is bludgeoned to death, an investigation into her murder brings her lover, Jonathan Fraser, played by Hugh Grant, sharply into the spotlight. Despite evidence stacked against him, does wife Grace, played by Nicole Kidman, and son Henry, played by Noah Jupe, stand by Jonathan?
So Diggs, episode 6, the finale of The Undoing. So last time we were left on a cliffhammer, as you like to call it, with this
Nice.
when Noah Jupe, Henry, is staring Nicole Kidman in the face after she discovers the hammer, which is the murder weapon in his violin case. And yeah, so the beginning of this episode, we start back at the same place with Nicole staring at Henry, and we begin to wonder what and how the hammer came into Henry's possession.
Yeah, we both had our theories at you can listen to them in episodes 4 and 5 of The Undoing that we did. We both had our theories. I thought that someone at his school would have planted it, Sylvia. What did you have a theory for it, or did you think that Noah had bloody done it, you bastard?
Well, I didn't. I suggested that, but it turns out basically all our theories were completely wrong. Not surprising. It sounds. I think basically the whole internet's theories were wrong about this, and it was all a bit more simplistic than we thought.
what was good about the hammer is, again, it's just like, so it turns out all of what we said, like you say, all of what we said was wrong, and the hammer had been discovered by Henry. He at the house where they went and hid in, or where Hugh went and hid when he ran away. He discovered it outside somewhere, and obviously Noah loves his dad. Noah Jupe loves his dad, as we talked about in earlier episodes. So he put it in a dishwasher twice to remove all the blood from it and to remove all any sort of markings and stuff, which is a nightmare. And Nicole did the right thing by telling people, but this presents a crossroads for Nicole now, and it's just another example of the show where, once again, a character who Nicole thinks is someone she can trust in her kid, lets her down. Her husband does over and over again, but now Noah's doing it as well. It's not telling her, but now she's got a crossroads. This is not looking good for my husband. What can I do?
And particularly as we have that quite dark moment where Hugh and Nicole go off separately, and Hugh effectively suggests that Noah could be the culprit here. And I think that really begins to show how manipulative Hugh is and how desperate he is. That he suddenly feels like everything's unraveling, and he's sort of clutching at straws, and he's so desperate that he sort of suggests that his own son could be behind bludgeoning a woman like 12 times with a hammer.
His 5'1", 11-year-old son could be the one to bludgeon this woman to death. I mean, it is insane. And also, but this is what's so good about, you're so right about that, because Noah Jupe, I need to call him Henry, his character's name. Henry overhears his dad saying that and goes, "Fuck you! You think it's me?" But Hugh turns on the charm, and is able to be like, "Look, in there, that was someone else. I was a madman. I'm desperate, that sort of thing. I wasn't thinking. But this is why I think the casting of Hugh Grant as this role is so perfect, because Hugh presents as this perfect, lovely guy, and is so able to turn on the charm straight away. It's exactly what the lawyer says. She's like, go out there, show them your charm. He lulls people into false sense of security, which is exactly what his typecasting is. He's typecast as this lovely, bumbling, handsome British guy who's lovely and nice and funny and sweet, and that's why he's so good.
I mean, he's absolutely brilliant at that role, and we're seeing it more and more as he takes on the role of the villain in his new roles in the Hugh Naissance. And there's a great article by GQ about this and about how, we see it in Very English Scandal, we see it in Paddington 2, and we see it in The Gentleman, actually, where he has this charming persona that you're immediately drawn to, and it's so charming that you kind of, it's easy to believe that he couldn't be responsible for something as dark as murder, but actually he gets away with so much before you realize that perhaps he could do something like that. So it's brilliant casting, and I think we're all fooled.
Well, this, as we say, Nicole now is at a crossroads, and this is where the twist comes, because I think she sees the hammer as the smoking gun. I think she sees, the hammer as the smoking hammer. She sees that as I think she comes to her senses, and it's quite sick. There's this moment where she goes, "Okay, put me on the stand," and she convinces them that she's gonna, back her husband. But actually, we won't bore you with the ins and outs of it, but she's, tells her mate to leak some stuff to the opposition, and eventually when the opposition cross-examine her, she reveals all about how Hugh killed his sister, how he had no remorse, how his own mother, blames him for
psychopath,
it.
Basically.
But exactly, completely dupes him in it. And that's the moment where finally the show has come full circle. You see in the first episode when Nicole Kidman is with her, is therapizing these people and going to them, you don't see the bad in your husbands or your husband or this person or this person. You're wrapped up in your head, and you don't see the bad in them. You can only, whereas everyone else can see quite clearly that, how bad they are. And it's funny because the exact same thing is happening to her this whole time. And finally, bang, last episode, she comes to her senses and exerts this plan.
Well, I mean, I don't know what you think, but I think it's quite a sick move from Nicole. And so this is the first time I think in the series we see her finally take charge, and she's like, I'm gonna absolutely screw you over. And she does it in a sick way, to be fair. And once we hear, and she's cross-examined by the prosecution lawyer, there's no coming back for Hugh. And there's this great little bit, I think, with just after she's come off the stand, where Hugh turns to his defense lawyer, who's called Hayley Fitzgerald, who we both think was absolutely outstanding in her role.
Fantastic.
And he's basically just like, you fucked this up for us. And she's like, no, you did, mate.
Yeah,
So shut
she's
the
your
fuck up.
wife. She's in your camp, and you let her go do lally and crazy. You're a fucking idiot. And there's so much menace from both of them in that scene. They almost both reveal themselves as the villain in that little moment. I thought that moment was, I was like in my chair, like going crazy, like this is so cool, because they both realise that she's just completely destroyed any, credible chance they had of winning this case.
Well, you're listening to Hugh Grant taking Hugh for granted on the radio. Hugh Grant taking Hugh for granted. Oh, the podcast show.
So this all happens, this huge twist, and I think, oh well, that's it. It's over for them, for the defense. And yet I looked and I was like, how? There's 17 minutes left. Oscar, you got to. So it's like the final day of the trial, and Hugh Grant's nowhere to be seen.
He goes AWOL. He goes absolute AWOL, and basically asks his son to come for last brekkie with him. The final, the last supper, if you will. And
Indeed.
he basically a flick has gone and is switched in his brain, hasn't it? Where he's basically lost the plot. And I mean, it's not very often we see Hugh Grant in a sort of road chase scenario, Fast and Furious kind of thing. But yeah, Hugh Grant takes off in his Range Rover with his son Henry, and it's pretty terrifying, to be honest. He's completely lost all reasoning and logic, and he's kind of doing what you imagine he did at the beginning, and he's fleeing the scene. And he's desperate. He's panicking, with no sense of reasoning in whatsoever.
Yeah, and he's flying down the highway, and but now I think it's time for a bit more hard analysis. I think I was somewhat caught in two minds ever so slightly about the ending, because we see a side to Hugh Grant that I haven't seen before, I don't think, this completely unhinged Hugh Grant. And we'd seen flashes of it before in the TV show, no less than when he bit that guy's finger off in the prison. Which actually, thinking about that now, like, why was that not picked up on more? That was mental. Anyway, that never really went anywhere, but that was pretty crazy. He should have gone to prison just for that. But it was amazing, and his son was so terrified, and the way I loved Hugh Grant kept sort of shouting, then suddenly looking, then stopping and smile. He kept smiling, and it was this horrible smile where it was such a forced smile, and he was just trying to comfort Henry in the worst way. And I thought that was brilliant. I thought that was great. Well, I mean, what did you think?
Well, I think you're right. It was that moment where that whole father-son bond, which had been so tight, and Henry was so admiring of Hugh, and suddenly I think again it's that moment where he suddenly like realizes that this is not the man I thought he was. And I think also, conversely to that, Hugh realizes he doesn't see me in the way that he used to. And it's kind of that. It's a bit of a tragic moment, and the pain in his in Henry's eyes and Hugh's eyes is pretty apparent. And it's pretty heartbreaking. But like you said, this unhinged Hugh is mental.
It's so cool, though. I really hope we see more of that because I don't know, there was a real realism behind it. Because sometimes, some actors, they get roles where they're allowed to be a bit unhinged, and it feels like it's almost like their Joker role. They get to go a bit crazy, and they get to be like, they get to be scratching themselves and be like, and all strange and weird, and they'll get Oscars for that. But what I loved about this is it felt real. One thing, though, I was a little bit perturbed by is it was a bit of a flashy ending. Why did Grace and Donald Sutherland get into a helicopter? Where did that come from to go and chase them as well? Surely it's the police's job to chase Hugh Grant and Noah Jupe up the highway. The fact that they're in the helicopter and the helicopter lands right next to the... Now, these are all things that obviously they're fine, but also it is a little bit of like, it's a bit Hollywood, the ending.
It is a little bit Hollywood, considering also... We basically had about 5 hours of television before this where it was basic pure build-up and long sequences and staring and mystery. And then literally the last 15 minutes is just a car chase. So that is a little bit jarring. But at the same time, it was quite fun because I think it was so unexpected. And I think, again, it was that bursting of the bubble. The facade and mystery is gone, and he's like, right, I'm just off. And he's off for he wants fried clams, which I thought was the best line in the whole
That was really funny.
He's like,
he kept being like, we're going to go have fried clams.
Ipswich clams, whatever they are.
Yeah. But big boy clams, those bad boys.
Well, I'm taking you. I'm taking you for granted. Well, I'm taking you. Well, I'm taking you for granted.
I want to ask you then, and now maybe we can start moving our thoughts onto like wider things about the show. Is what do you think about the fact that it was Hugh Grant? Because also interspersed with the last like 20-30 minutes of the show, Hugh Grant starts recollecting what actually happened. He has this fight with Elena. He ends up, she's like, you won't leave, and he smacks her over the head a few times, and then she grabs a hammer to attack him. He grabs it, and then completely has her, doesn't have to like hit her with the hammer, has her on the floor. She's like, no, don't do anything, and he's like, smacks her, kills her, smacks her again, and just keeps smacking. It's horrid.
It is horrid.
It's horrible. But so now we're in no doubt of who it is. What do you think about the fact that it is Hugh Grant? He is the culprit.
Well, I actually loved it, to be honest. I was, again, of two minds. Firstly, I loved it that it was Hugh because I think that it was unexpected, and a lot of people didn't think that he had this role in him. I seen a lot on people on Twitter being like, I never thought Hugh could be a psychopath. I never seen this side of Hugh Grant. We've been sitting here analysing, and I think I knew he had something like this in him, and we know that he can play the villain really well. He was very convincing. If I put my sort of show hat on, I was a little bit disappointed. It wasn't very complex.
I mean, I think that will do the show some damage. I think there'll be a lot of people who we've been watching this whodunit. There'll be people on Reddit and on other decrepit websites, much like we were last episode, putting their theories out there and being like, oh, I think it's Donald Sutherland, or I think it's, blah, blah, or I think it's Henry. And that's the problem with the whodunit, is that we're all thinking whodunit and how did they do it? And there's all these theories that get put out there. So then when you give it to us that it's the main man who was the suspect all along and had all the evidence stacked against him anyway, I think there's a lot of people who are going to be quite annoyed about that.
I think what the show was trying to do, I think you're right, was really trying to examine the psyche around Grace's character and what she was thinking. But that sort of felt just a little bit flat. I think for the show to really, really excelled, that had to be absolutely spot on, and it just didn't quite work in places, I felt. And then as a result left this feeling of it sort of being drawn out and not much happening a lot of the time. I think that's where it could have been improved. But to be honest, every time that Hugh was in it, I was pretty happy.
Oh yeah. I mean, he was great, and this, as I say, for what the show is, and now we know it is, it's all about how Hugh is this bastard liar who is so good at presenting this front, and then suddenly switching and being evil and malevolent. It's brilliant, and he's brilliant at it. And obviously, we want to see Hugh, and we want to enjoy and love all that. But because of the way it's packaged as a whodunit, or should I say Hughdunit? Hughdunit. Stumbled across that one. That's very good. Sorry, I just got to take a moment. I love that.
Are you a business owner? Are you running a political campaign? Are you a furniture outlet having yet another sale? If the answer to any of those questions isn't no, then you can have your advertisement right here. The Taking You for Granted podcast gets over 100 listeners every single episode. For prices starting as low as 6 figures, you can have your advertisement right here. So what are you waiting for? Email takingyouforgranted@gmail.com today for a full price list, and you can have your advertisement right here.
The Undoing, in general, do we think Hugh's stock has risen or fallen?
Oh, that's a great question. Do we think his stock has risen? I think his stock has to have risen. I mean, it's an HBO show. From what I can tell, lots of people in America have been watching and talking about it. Maybe that's just me thinking that, though, because we follow Hugh Grant so much. We just see the people that do talk about it. And he puts in a brilliant performance. You know, I don't know what else he can do at this point. Maybe the show's not the absolute pinnacle, but this last episode was great fun. So I think his stock has risen. What about you?
Well, I mean, all I've been seeing on Twitter is love. Pure love for Hugh Grant. I've been trying to remind people who keep on saying, this is the first time he hasn't played a rom-com role, that they need to go and listen to all our episodes.
Absolutely.
There is love, and there is a lot of Emmy clapping. There's a lot of memes of Nicole Kidman and Hugh Grant when they collect their Emmy awards, kind of thing. So that remains to be seen. There'll be another huge news for that if that comes around.
Oh yes, please.
But I've also thought that maybe we should just discuss for a moment whether there's anything, because I think we are both aware that we offer a lot of praise to Hugh in this podcast. But is there anything?
What?
Is there anything in his performance in this show which you would have liked to see that was a bit different, or something? Not that we can offer areas of improvement to such an esteemed actor, but are there areas that you would have, things that you didn't like about his performance?
Do you know what? No. Maybe the show would have been different if it didn't say this is a whodunit. This is a woman who loves her husband and can't see that he's a bastard.
It would have been better if it had been signposted more as a thriller drama than a murder mystery. Because the murder mystery. Another thing that I think the show fell short on was that it didn't offer any alternatives really to Hugh. So it was kind of like I was clutching at straws. Yes, because in the last episode I was expecting a real unraveling and a sort of understanding from the audience of like why another character potentially had the motive to kill her, and then I'm being like, oh, okay, I get it now. I understand why all these things happen in previous episodes. But that never happened, and in reality, there was never really an alternative to Hugh as the murder suspect. Like, they chucked in the husband of Elena. They featured Donald Sutherland. They featured Sylvia. So there was sort of thoughts about that, but in reality, there was never any grounding evidence to suggest that.
I mean, am I giving the show the benefit of the doubt here by saying, isn't that it doing its job to perfection? Because even though we were thrown every episode, it was constantly, look, it's Hugh. But we were constantly going, but maybe it's blah, blah, and maybe it's blah, blah. Were we, in that way, Nicole Kidman?
Yeah, are we part of that? Are we basically part of the whole scheme of Hugh? We've been manipulated by him.
I mean, are they big braining us right now? Is that what we're meant to come away with? Because I feel like don't get me wrong, I am on board with that. I am on board with the idea that it's not a whodunit for us, it's a whodunit for Nicole, and if we're in her mindset, that's why we thought it was a whodunit. But I think if you're going to do that, if you're going to big brain us like that, you've got to signpost it. You've got to tell us that's what's gone on at the end in that last episode. You've got to be like, you idiots, you fell for it. Do you know what I mean? Then I would be like, boof, that is the best TV show in the world.
Taking you for granted. taking Hugh for granted, taking Hugh for granted. What did you think, lads? Were they taking Hugh for granted?
Right, Oscar, The Undoing, HBO 2020. I've got to ask you that question. It feels like ages since I've asked you this question because it's been 6 weeks. Has The Undoing been taking Hugh for granted?
Diggs, we spent a long time just discussing our overarching thoughts on the series, and I think we both have a feeling that there could have been areas that it could have been better. But if you look at this performance purely from a Hugh Grant point of view, as we do, you know, he's taken a bit of a gamble here in his career, you could say, age 60. I think he's only added to his credentials here, and I think he's slowly writing a new annal in the history of TV and filmmaking. And no, we are not taking you for granted here.
Absolutely not. I mean, I have to agree. I think the show, we have our nitpicks here and there, but overall, particularly due to that last episode, I had so much fun with it. I feel like if they'd drawn that out longer and maybe started the trial in episode 5 or something, we might be talking differently. But the show is a bit slow at points. You know, blah, blah, blah. We've talked about all this. But Hugh Grant is in it loads. He's the centre of attention. He's bloody fantastic in it. Absolutely brilliant. Am I going to tell a Hugh Grant fan to not watch this? No. I'm going to tell them, get that on immediately. I'm going to say, get The Undoing on as soon as you get home. And it's a good show. And it's only made 10 times better by the fact that Hugh Grant's in it. So,
and Hugh is the bloody murderer. I mean, come on.
Come on.
That's enough in
exactly
itself. That's enough in
Exactly.
itself to keep you coming back for more. There's just one final question I wanted to ask now. And
please.
The final question is, what's next? What's next for Hugh Grant? He's turned 60 in September. A man, I mean, he's still looking pretty good, but you know, there's a few wrinkles. There's a bit of a sign of old age coming on. Does he really go into semi-retirement now? Does he really put his feet up and think, you know, I've done it, I don't need to do much more, just going to continue playing Barbies with the kids? Or is there more to come? Is this only just got his appetite back up for maybe more TV potentially?
What a great question. I mean, look, we've got our ears pretty firmly to the ground on this whole Hugh Grant shit. and I haven't heard any mumblings or grumblings at all about any. This is the problem. You're right. This might be the last time we see Hugh on the big screen or small screen for at least a year. I'm worried that 2021 will be devoid of any Hugh Grant, and I think we as Hugh Grant fans need to band together and really hold each other tight. It's going to be a cold, long, hard year. I'm very worried about that. I think 2022 will be 2020 Hugh. He'll be back. There'll be a film or a TV show or both, like this year with The Gentleman and The Undoing. And I think he'll be back and we'll be loving it.
Let's hope.
What do you think, Oscar?
Well, I mean, look, 2020 has not been the best year for most of us, but for Hugh Grant, it's been a pretty good year. Like you said, The Gentleman, The Undoing. That's two new things to add to his already very, very long CV. And yeah, like you said, there might not be much to come in for a bit, which hopefully doesn't put us out of business, but we will still be there waiting and watching with bated breath for the next Hugh Grant show.
What if he does a fucking play?
Mate, if he joins the Royal Shakespeare Company, mate, that'd be so sick, seeing him like live at the Globe.
Yeah, exactly. That'd be incredible. I mean, he'd never do it. He hates all that. But that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening as ever, guys. Follow us on all the socials. If you're new around here, we review every single film starring Hugh Grant. Check out the back catalogue. Check us out on Twitter, Instagram. Just search up Taking You for Granted.
Yeah, go and check out The Undoing if you haven't watched it already. Like we said,
we've ruined the ending for you.
We've ruined the ending for you, but it's still bloody good. So go check it out.
Exactly. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Taking Hugh for Granted is produced, edited and presented by Diggory Waite and Oscar Beardmore Gray.
The producers of Taking Hugh for Granted would like to state that this podcast is in no way associated with the actor Hugh John Mungo Grant, nor does it endorse his views or represent him in any way. Instead, by creating this podcast, Oscar and Diggory hope to celebrate Hugh's illustrious career, reliving his old classics and shedding light on some of his hidden gems. Hugh, if you're listening, we hope you approve.